the opportunity to do this. And please, let's make this a starting point rather than a one-time thing. To me, this is one of the most important things we can do as scientists, is learn some of the basic ways that we can better connect with other people. And what we'll talk about today are some very fundamental concepts that really have nothing to do with science so much as they have to do with the way in which we present information in order to be persuasive. How do we change someone else's heart and mind, especially someone who doesn't want to be changed? And these are things that have frustrated me forever, and it took a long time to learn how to fix that. So that's what we'll talk about today. I'll spend about maybe 15 minutes at the most, 20 minutes, and then turn this over to you with some ways you can apply what we've learned today. Okay, so this is good stuff. The bottom line is that as scientists, we're always told in traditional science communication, well, be really clear about your meanings and make sure you don't talk over people's heads. Give them plenty of facts and statistics, because facts and statistics change everything. And it's not true. Facts are absolutely useless until you've established trust. So what we'll talk about today is trust building. And this doesn't just apply to science communication, it applies to any scenario in politics and advertising across the board. And you can start to see the failures that happen frequently in communication because of a lack of established trust. So we'll talk about how that works. I'll put this slide up here because I was a postdoc in Wisconsin in 2000, and I went to this place to give a talk. They asked me to give a talk on genetic engineering, and place very much opposed to modern agriculture, especially anything to do with genetics. And I went there and gave a talk, and I drew pictures on the board of transformation vectors, and I talked about selectable markers and kanamycin resistance and restriction sites. And guess how many hearts and minds I changed that day? Nobody. It was actually a very conscientious crowd of my neighbors, people who I knew from around the neighborhood, and they were not compelled. And it was because I approached it the way that scientists approach a communications opportunity. Speak above their heads, show why you have letters after your name, beat them to death with data and statistics, and sure, everybody will feel better. And it only took me about 12 more years of getting it wrong before I'd realized that wasn't working. So what I'll talk about today now is how I came back from that point and how we changed the way we did this. The bottom line is that facts don't change minds. And there's some very good reasons for this. Facts don't matter until you've established trust. And that's why we'll focus on the trust idea. And so what is trust? Trust is something that comes from a combination of factors, and it comes from competence and reliability. What happened? Am I still, did I drop out?
Yeah, you paused for a minute.
Okay, so it dropped out. Let me just go back to this then. We were on a good roll there. So the next big part was reliability. And reliability is very important, and it's a good one for all of you to know early in your career, is that if you are asked to do something and you don't do it, the first time you fail to show up on time or early or whatever is when people start to make judgments about how much they trust you. So competence and reliability are something that we have very strong handles on. We're good at that stuff as scientists. Intimacy, not so much. There's no place for that in science necessarily. And traditionally, scientific media and scientific communication have been devoid of intimacy. It's about statistics. It's about error bars. It's about figures. It's about, this is the conversation that we have, you and me as a scientist and a student, or as scientists together, professor and student, we talk about the facts, and that's great, but that doesn't work with the public. To build the trust, you have to have a level of this idea of intimacy, and we'll talk about how you build that. And the last part is self-motivation. Why are you doing what you're doing? Why are you talking about science? Why do you care? And that's the big question. Why do you care? And so that it's also tied with intimacy. So the things we need to fix are intimacy and self-motivation as we build the trust equation. And here's how we do it. A couple things. So what we want to do is increase our competence, which we do all the time, increase our reliability by stepping into opportunities when they exist and always following through with what we say we'll do. But then we also need to increase our sense of intimacy and decrease the sense of self-motivation. And I'll show you how to do that. And by the way, this isn't just about science. This is stuff that you can use in your everyday life. These are a set of skills that will change the way you buy a car, negotiate a deal on a car or a house. My wife hates arguing with me because she says, "Oh, you're doing that equation again." So it works. It's a very good way to persuade others. Okay.
I think you might be frozen again. We'll just wait another minute.
I'm back. Man, that was weird. I live out in the country, and sometimes these things can get a little spotty. Okay, but we'll get you. We'll make this work.
Okay.
Let me see. So I am sharing a screen. So you see the screen now?
We can see the screen, yeah.
Okay, that's cool. All right, so let's go forward to where we were. I'm not seeing. I'm sorry this is such a problem. I don't get what the problem is here. I'm not seeing my screen now. I'm not seeing my screen. All right, here's the whole thing. Share screen. This is host disabled participant screen sharing. But you can still
No, you should still be able to hear.
Okay, you can still
And again, I think you might have to.
How about now? Is that there?
We can't see it, but
Oh, you can? All right, let me try it again. Let me go back to here. Gosh, I'm really sorry, everybody. This should be, oh, there. Okay, here we go. PowerPoint. All right, that should do it.
Perfect,
Good?
yeah.
All right, good. Thanks. All right, here we go. Back to the cognitive psychology and the reptile brain. Um, there's two parts of the brain that scientists, well, let's talk about it this way, how people process information. And Dan Kahneman was he's an economist, but also a psychologist who talks about the decisions people make and how they make decisions around value and other types of information. He reminds us that the brain has two ways that we share information. And the first is this, what he calls system one, very emotional, irrational, reactive part of the brain, fast. Okay. 2 + 2 is 4, you know. System two is this very slow, just part of the brain. It's logic and strategy. It's calculating. That's system two. And what he talks about and why this is important is because system one is, you know, the limbic system, right? There's emotional centers. System two is the cerebral cortex. It's where we synthesize and put together information. Why this is important is because when people are asking questions about food and farming, they're typically coming from an emotional, reactive, evolutionary, conserved nervousness, right, about food farming. You know, I don't like the chemicals. I don't like the, you know, so or whatever they don't like about, you know, whatever. System two is where we come from as scientists. So we're coming from the facts and figures and all the stuff we learn in the books. And so we're trying to solve an emotional problem by throwing data at it. And if people are not making decisions based on evidence, why do we possibly give them more evidence? And that's the mistake we always make. We're talking to people as though they're scientists because that's the conversation we like having with each other. You know, we critique each other's work. We take apart each other's thoughts. And that's the idea that makes us better. When someone does this in the public and we go after their emotional problem using a system two rationale, we alienate them. It's almost like we don't listen. We're just there to tell them how it is rather than talking to and understanding how they feel. And there's the word feel, right? So we're talking about building intimacy. We have to be able to deal with that. So here we go. How do we do it? Aristotle had some ideas about persuasion, and he talked about there being three parts of a good argument. That you would have pathos, logos, and ethos. Pathos, you see the word patho in there, that's the root of sympathy and empathy, right? There's feelings involved. Logos, this is sciences. This is logic, reason, words. And so in the battle of pathos and logos, you see what Kahneman described as system one and system two, this emotional idea versus a logical and reasonable idea. So in a question of the heart versus the head, okay, a mom questioning, you know, is this ethical for you to be crossing plants? Is this reasonable for you to make hybrids? Are they safe for my kids? Those questions seem irrational to us. We know about plant domestication and plant breeding, but to that mom, she has some very legitimate concerns in her heart. And so when we just pile on the facts, it doesn't change that. So the way that we're going to change her mind is by dealing with ethos. And ethos is a big part of the trust equation. It's our competence. Where do we learn what we learned? Why do we do that? But more importantly, it's about our values. Why do you do what you do? And that's the first way to start every single conversation. Why do you do what you do? What are your values? You know, all of you are graduate students, and I'll tell you, it's not an easy road. It's a very difficult in terms of preparation to get there, and then the work you have to do where you are for a career that you don't know that you'll ever have. You know, we don't even, so it's a very challenging thing. And so how do you and so the reason you do it is because of your values, your value of education, your value of acquiring knowledge, your value of sharing problems and the issue of world food security. Those are why you do what you do. And you need to understand, you know, individually, you know, be able to say, I do it because of this. You know, I know why I do what I do. But keep in mind what ethos is. It's the why. Okay, really important. You lead with your ethics, and we'll talk about that in a minute. So basically this whole idea of building trust relies on why we do what we do. And I can tell you why I do. I think about, and I normally would put these up in order, but I think about farmers that are, barely making a profit these days, and domestic food production, which is threatened by many different challenges. And there's ways that I and other university scientists are working to solve that. Many of you are doing that. I think about issues of food security in the developing world and how technology can help them. It's not necessarily technology I can deliver because I don't work in that space, but it's technology I understand and can communicate about actively in an effort to allow that technology to flow to applications that can have profound impacts in the developing world. I think about American consumers who eat too much of the wrong kinds of foods. And those are things that something that my lab is working on, and also environmental impacts. So when I talk to anybody about why I do what I do, it's for farmers, consumers, the environment, and food insecure. And when you come at it from that side, you automatically align with anybody you talk to, or at least for the most part. So in other words, starting a conversation of here's why I do what I do puts you on the same page as the person who may have adversarial ideas about you and what you do. And when you talk about values, you increase intimacy. You also decrease that idea of self-interest. Okay, so you see how that really affects the trust equation. Your competence and reliability stay the same, but now you're showing you're in this for the right reasons, same reasons they're in it. And there's no better way to diffuse a contentious argument than to show that you're on the same page as the person who you're in the argument with. You just have a different perspective and a different way to address the problem. And that's a beautiful tactic in de-escalation. And when you see what's happening in the world today in many different theaters, that ability to de-escalate a conflict is something that is a good skill to have. The other big deal is not listening to understand. And let me explain what that means. We don't listen very well as scientists. We're the ones who tell people what to think. We're the ones who tell you how it is. We need to be listening, especially when we work with the public. I think this has been really augmented by the events of the last several weeks as we see people who refuse to listen to how other people truly feel about their life experiences and worldviews. And I think that's part of the problems we have on a social side. We're not listening. But when we do it as scientists, it's pretty egregious. Let me explain exactly what that means. But let's even skip science and talk about hostage negotiation. In hostage negotiation, you are in a situation as a hostage negotiator where you need to solve this problem and you can't lose. And years ago in New York, hostage negotiation was strong arm. We're gonna, use force, use tear gas and grenades, and we're gonna, storm the building, and we'll get out as many hostages as we can. And police were hurt and injured. Hostages were killed. These were very dangerous scenarios. And a guy who was a hostage negotiator said, let's try a different approach. And in the book, Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss, he uses the idea of listening first and then reacting. So what he calls this is active listening. And this is a great skill to have. And we could spend an hour on this, but I'll just be brief. What this means, active listening means you're showing the other person that you understand them. And this is an empathy step. This is a trust building step. It builds intimacy. So in other words, someone would be in a room with a hostage and say, the hostage negotiator, instead of saying, come out with your hands up or else we're coming in, would say, why are you here today? Why are you here today? How are you feeling? What are the people in that room feeling? And a hostage negotiator would say, or a hostage taker would say, well, my wife left me, I lost my job, my dog died, and whatever. And the hostage negotiator in active listening would reframe what that person just said back the other way and would say, you're going through a lot right now. It's a lot of very trying circumstances. I understand that. That is the idea of active listening. It's called mirroring or branding. There's a bunch of different terms for it. But the idea is that you say to somebody that you're listening by basically telling them what they're telling you. And it works like a charm. It builds intimacy because it shows you're not listening to debate them. You're listening to understand them. And again, scientists, we're listening to debate. We're listening to debate. Listen to understand. And when someone comes to you with a point that you disagree with, listen to understand. It's a really important thing. And that's something that Voss teaches us very well. It's a good book to listen to. Intellectual charity we'll talk about another day, but the idea here is that it provides the other person with a sense of participation in that conversation. You're not just steamrolling them as a scientist. It's really kind of hard to develop that skill, but it works. Okay, so the last thing we'll talk about is starting with why, and I talked about this a little bit before. Simon Sinek he talks about people buy what you do, they don't buy what you do or how you do it, they buy why you do it. And this is something that advertisers really started to figure out in the last 10 years. In the 1980s, Apple had its values. Okay, these are the things that were important to us as a values. This is why we did it, why we do it. 1980s. Other companies, they talked about what and how. We have a bigger hard drive, we have more RAM, we have this. And which company is still around making computers and is a multi-billion dollar company? It's because they shared their values, not the facts. So let's wrap it up with this. And here's the formula I want you to apply in a breakout session. You have to listen and demonstrate that you're listening. Builds empathy, builds intimacy. Second, share your values. Find common ground. And talk about why it's important. Help others visualize. Help people share your passion, share your idea, and then propose a solution. And when you propose your solutions, make sure that you're helping others realize how the solutions fit with values. Now, the reason that we're going to, solution, we switched to this other type of herbicide because it has lower impact on the environment and is something that will be better to use around aquatic environments where aquatic populations can be effective. And then help people visualize what it's like if you don't implement their solution. So, if we continue with the ones we're using, it's going to continue to impact aquatic environments, the lowest levels of tropic levels, which can have profound effects on later populations, blah, blah, blah. You see where I'm going. And then the action step. How do you get people to take action? You give them what you need them to do. And it may be something like change their attitude, but at the same time, it may be something like write your congressman. Whatever it is, you need to have some sort of action step. So what I'd like you to do today, and this is going to be the breakout session, and it's about 11:30 now, so if we can do this for 15 minutes, well, if you can do it for 10 and then we can talk about it, see if we can do a 1-minute talk answering these questions. And I don't know how you want to do this, but let me give you the questions and you can assign them or whatever, pick which one you like. You're President Trump's speechwriter. He sees protests on Pennsylvania Avenue. Write his Rose Garden address. And I think it would have been so easy for me. Okay, next, you're the mayor of Minneapolis. You see riots and looting happening in the city. How do you bring peace? And remember the formula: listening, values, talking about the common values. And by the way, in those previous two scenarios, nobody did that. You're a faculty member at a university that's being harassed online. Someone doesn't like you using animals in drug study. How do you address it? You're a scientist that's been assigned to speak to a farmer group on climate change who don't believe that data. How do you do it? A group of mommy bloggers wants you to the essence of the idea. That's good enough, and we'll go from there. So what do you do, Adina?
Oh, sorry, my screen froze for a second, but how about we start with one question and then break out into groups so that everyone can discuss it, and then we can come back together and see how different groups approach the same question.
I love it. Let's. Is there one that you found particularly compelling?
I'll let you choose.
I think that I would like everybody to do you're President Trump's speechwriter and you see the protests on Pennsylvania Avenue and you need to write a speech to address the situation. And remember, start with listening, values, and propose solutions that are based on those values. And I think this is the reason I picked this one is because it's topical, and it also shows you the strategic failures in communications that can happen even at the highest levels of government. So there you go. So give that a shot and let's see what we get.
All right, I'm going to put everyone into rooms now. Does 5 minutes seem good for this question?
Yeah, go with 5 minutes, and just even if you just get a point, a few points, that's going to be great. But
All
think
right,
about
great.
values and listening.
Great.
All right.
Okay, everyone should see the rooms now to be able to join.
Yeah, I don't need to join a breakout room.
Oh yeah, don't worry about that one.
Yeah. I'll push later.
Okay, it looks like I couldn't put myself in a room. I've never done this before. But it looks like almost everyone else is in the rooms, so.
That's good. Yeah, this will be fun. And then we'll do 15 minutes of questions at the end, or however long it goes. I can stick around for a bit.
Great.
My next one's at 4.
All right, well, I'm sure we won't stay that long, but it's good to have time.
It's happened. I did a talk at Colorado College, and the students didn't want to stop. And we just kept going and going, and they closed the building, they shut down the student union, and we were the last ones out. It was a good
Wow.
night.
I think it's such a good topic for everyone. Like we all relate to it, you know.
But isn't it very counterintuitive?
What do you mean?
Well, this topic of trust building in science communication. I mean, it's something that we never. It's something you rarely have heard. You're hearing it more and more now, but it seems very counterintuitive to what someone would talk about when you would say we're going to study science communication. So.
Right. Yeah, I think once you actually start working in science and then talk to people, you see how big of an issue it is. But maybe before, people don't think that that's a big concern.
Yeah.
For me, it's also convincing family and friends that a lot of the things they see online are not true.
Yes.
Especially with coronavirus, it's been scary.
That should have been one of my other questions. I meant to put that one in there, but this idea of, I think if I would have written his speech the other night, it was such a strategic failure in that it was it could have really changed a lot of perceptions, or at least really got people confused. It was very interesting. Here, I'm trying to find something on my other computer here. But all right.
All right, we'll give them 2 more minutes. When you were going through the questions, my screen froze for a second, but I could tell that it was still working for you. So
yeah, bandwidth is an issue. I live out in the sticks, and so once in a while we get blips in the. And it's not a big deal when you're on a web browsing or reading the news, but it's a problem when you are on something that has high demand on bandwidth.
Yeah. Especially in group meetings like this.
Yeah, you're trying to shove a lot through the pipe.
Yeah.
So, all good. I'm glad we did this. There's a dozen topics we can cover, and maybe I'll do it as a journal club in the fall.
That would be great.
Yeah, we might do that, and we'll study we'll talk more about the psychology and some of the things there around hot science topics. We'll see how that goes.
That would be really interesting.
Yeah, I'd love to do it. I'm teaching a class for the first time, so I'm going to be a little bit busy and overwhelmed, but we'll see.
Which class is it?
Molecular biology, plant molecular biology.
Is is that the one that Dr. Bexy or Dr. Altpeter would teach?
No, it was the one that Eduardo Vallejos used to teach.
Oh, okay. I think I'm
And yeah,
a lot
and
of the names kind of get me confused because I've taken the different molecular classes and
I
yeah.
know. No, mine will be fun. It'll be it's a topic I know inside and out, and so
Oh yeah,
going back to some of the fundamental stuff will be fun.
that sounds great. Okay, I think I can bring them back now. Let's see. Okay, so now they have 30 seconds to come back.
All right, well, that's kind of fun.
Yeah.
Hi, Modesta.
Hi, Kevin.
Gosh, it's nice to see you.
I had my session with Sarup.
It's so funny that you work with people every day and you see them around, and now it's like I've been on the moon. I haven't I mean, you guys are all going through the same thing, but
Right.
it's really weird how you just miss conversations with other people in person. But
Right.
Okay, it looks like everyone's back.
hi, everybody. So how do we want to do this? You want to just go down the line and have each group kind of hit how they would have handled the question?
Yeah, I think there were 4 groups. If anyone just wants to jump in and talk about what they discussed.
So I was in a group with Megan, and we talked about how the first and like we think most important thing would be to address kind of the spark that started the protest, but also acknowledge that people aren't reacting to one event. It's not really an isolated event, and so it's kind of a straw that broke the camel's back.
So how would you
Sorry.
Oh no, I'm sorry. I jumped in there. Go ahead.
And then as a call to action, first saying what we as the president would be doing to assess our policies and make those changes, and then call more local government levels to do the same.
Yeah, very good. So what would be a statement of values that he should have, let's do it first. What would be a statement of I'm listening? What would have been a good example of that he could have done?
Like word for word?
Well, I don't know, just like what would you have written as his speechwriter to show that he's listening? It's not easy.
No, it's not. I think that just, denouncing the officers who have been abusing their power would be a really good way to level with everyone, and
Yeah,
like without being like in blind defense of the police force.
yeah, I think you're getting there. I think that the one critique I would have on that approach would be it's coming at things that are so specific. And I think or let's see what other people come up with first, and then we'll talk about other ways we could do this. So who else has an idea?
Sarup and I talked about something that people could be protesting about, which we use unemployment as an example. So we thought maybe we could start with Trump telling a story of how he used to be unemployed and how he can relate and understand the way people feel. I mean, that story probably doesn't exist, but yeah, how he understands the way people feel, so he could empathize with them, and then he could talk to them about how his ambition, I mean, coming from unemployment, his ambition now is to make sure that his administration and his policies is going to reflect all of their concerns and is going to help them, like he's going to set up policies or maybe implement some of them that will be very beneficial and at least solve whatever problem they're protesting about.
Okay, so that's good. So you see how that fits the trust equation. You're talking about building intimacy through that kind of familiarity and empathy, right? And that's good. So that's a good step in that direction. Who else has some ideas on this?
Maybe he could have said that he's also hurt by seeing that video,
Mm-hmm.
that he's sorry that that happened, and that he's also affected for that. So he can put himself in the same level of all the people that are protesting, because the
Mm-hmm.
people are sad and upset and angry too. So yeah, maybe he can emotionally, he can put in the same level.
So that was a really good strategy, because that shows empathy. It says that I
Mhm.
understand what you're feeling, right? It's
Yeah.
listening to understand. And I'm feeling the same thing too. I
Mhm.
can understand what you're feeling, because it bothers me too. And that's a very strong way to de-escalate. Any other thoughts? Or is that the three groups, or just three groups?
Yeah, we also we talked about very similar things, and really starting off by saying that we understand and that we too are outraged that Americans are dying, even referencing that the the government from the top down has made moves to protect extreme moves to protect Americans' lives from this pandemic, that the government will also be taking extreme actions to protect the American lives that have been dying at the hands of force, kind of going into those shared values, that we've made hundreds of years of progress and that it's not enough, and then looking at solutions that the federal government could immediately do, and recognizing that it's a very complex situation that will require teasing out a lot of factors as they look for the long-term solutions, looking with state and local governments.
No, very good. Can you imagine if, whenever that was, a week and a half ago, if he would have shown up in the Rose Garden and said exactly what you said? How different the tenor of the entire thing would be. I mean, so who else? Is there another group?
I think that was everyone.
Okay. Yeah, I think that if I had to do this, and let's talk about, maybe using the formula, really tight to the formula. If he came out and said, I'm amazed at how many people are here to be heard and voicing their concerns and voicing their disgust, and I'm there with you, and I'm not just your president standing in front of you, I'm a friend standing aside you, and together we're going to take this on. And values, the most important thing is uniform application of justice, and that an injustice against one of us, against one person, is an injustice against all of us. And that's kind of a paraphrase of Dr. King. The idea that that law enforcement must work within a set of rules in order for us to have trust of law enforcement. And we're going to, and so you can see how you can de-escalate a situation with those ideas of active listening and sharing values, and then proposing solutions, as we've discussed. But if you look at any of those other scenarios, Adina mentioned, talking to family about coronavirus, and the online information that's awful. There's every single one of these can be used by, you know, eh, I understand how people can be deceived by online information about coronavirus, because I see it all the time too. And if I wasn't a scientist, I'd tend to believe it because it's very convincing. But what's most important to me is the health of my friends and neighbors and myself, my community. And so you see how you add that level of shared values, and then you can talk about your solutions. So it's really formulaic, and the more you do it, the better you get at it. So, Adina, do you want me to do those questions?
Yeah,
Unless
that
there's
sounds
anything
great.
else.
Yeah, let's start with the questions. I'm going to put the ones that people submitted first, and then maybe if anyone has more questions, we'll add
You bet.
that. All right, it's going to be in the comments.
Oh, you know what? I'm going to have to stop sharing my screen maybe. Let me see.
You should be able to still see the comments, I think.
Yeah, I'm not seeing them, unfortunately. Let me get rid of that and then blow that up. And I'm not seeing them anywhere. Oh, here, chat. Got it. Ah, good. All right. So how do you advance your views to people who are unwilling to change theirs or don't seem to keep an open mind? I like to think that no one is a lost cause, but how do we reach them? And it's what we talked about today. And I've actually stepped into these very contentious conversations on purpose because for a long time, I was always the token scientist at, say, anti-GMO or like creationist events and things. Discussions on climate change, they bring me in because I have a reputation of being respectful and having a conversation that's reasonable. And so to get my foot in the door with that, with a group that I know is going to be pushing back, um, gosh, that's the best Rubik's Cube you can throw me, because I can say, we're on the same page. I care about the same things you do. Convince them of that. Show that you're listening and understand their concerns. That's the whole way you reach people who have completely dug in their heels. And you got to start with that. The other important thing to keep in mind, especially in an online environment, is that oftentimes you will be in a contentious discussion or take on a topic with someone who you feel that is entrenched and will not change, but you have the opportunity to change everybody else who's watching. So you may not change that one person, but you can affect others. And that's why you have to keep that formula and keep it high road and keep it respectful, because you will change other people who are watching. Ask me how I know. I mean, it's been years that I've been able to pick up the collateral vote, if you will. I've been able to get people to send me thank you letters because they saw a respectful conversation with somebody who's absolutely awful. That changes hearts and minds, builds intimacy, and decreases self-motivation. You get trust. Number 2, I don't have my glasses on, so I keep leaning way back. And this is where I live, by the way. So one of these days, we're going to actually have a thing at my house, I hope, once we get back to school. How to share research that requires a foundational understanding of horticulture to a general audience. And I think that idea, again, goes back to shared values, right? It goes back to the idea of we all need to worry about safe, affordable, delicious food, and something we all want. And from that platform of shared values, how do we get it? Well, let me tell you about the threats that are going on in horticulture. Competition from foreign companies or countries, new insects, pests, and pathogens, lack of labor. All of these things threaten that. And so when you talk to somebody about your values, we want it affordable, abundant, and high quality and safe, you're on the same page as them. And then when you talk about threats to it and challenges, things like labor shortages, pest pathogens, all that stuff, now you start to invoke the idea of scarcity. And Kahneman was also also talked a lot about scarcity as being a tremendous motivator of human decision making. When they tell you on the infomercial, well, we only have 14 more available, act now. That idea is to give you the hint of scarcity, and that helps things move. And when you're talking to a general audience, that's all you need to do is share your values and show them why it's important. And then the idea of the threats and challenges to horticulture are something that people don't appreciate, but need to appreciate. And so you don't need to go into details about, did you use a 10-10-10 or a 28-7-4 fertilizer? Who cares? It's about why you do it, not how you do it. Next question: how to help people find reliable sources of info, and how to help people ignore unreliable sources. And that's a huge thing these days. But what I would encourage people to do, what I always encourage people to do, is look at all sources and say, I want you to go out and look at these things, but I want you to understand who the credible sources are. Because when you automatically start to advise people to ignore certain sources, it it decreases that sense of self-motivation in the trust equation, right? Or it increases it. It shows that you're in it for the wrong reason. You're trying to sell your point of view. That you develop intimacy and a sense of less self-motivation when you're saying, I'd like you to look at everything, but please come back and talk to me, and let's sort through it together. When you make those overtures to people, especially in an online environment, you get takers. And if you leave your email address, have an email address you use just for correspondence online, you'll be surprised how many times people will ring you up and talk to you about it. So very important. I have trouble making topics in plant science interesting to school-age children. I love this one. Do you have any tips for how to make complex or seemingly boring topics interesting to kids, teens? Yeah, boring topics are boring because they're taught boringly. And here's the deal with kids, and this is something that our school system fails with over and over again. And I'm no expert in education, but I know how to teach people. When you have kids, and you're teaching kids, teaching children, and I don't think anybody here has been to a classroom with me, but we'll do this. There's plenty of opportunity. Oh, Maria or Angelica, yeah, Maria San Clementi's here. Angelica's done this before. How do we reach kids? And here's the deal. You don't teach kids science by giving them facts and figures and data and facts. It doesn't work. You ask them to solve a problem. You give them the problem and then have them devise the hypothesis and how to test it. That's science, right? Who cares about, how many electrons are around a carbon atom? It's about, can you use this toolbox of the scientific method to solve a problem? And you don't tell them that. When I go to classrooms, the best one that I just love is we talk about citrus greening. And I say we have a disease in oranges that is a bacterial disease in the vasculature, the way the water and nutrients move around in the plant, and it's spread by an insect, and it causes problems in nutrition, and the tree eventually dies. How do we fix it? And some kids will, and it's incredible because every hand in the room goes in the air. And one kid will say, well, what if you just could kill the insect? Then you wouldn't have it spread. Another kid will say, well, what if you use antibiotics to kill bacteria? Because when I had an ear infection, I took antibiotics. And another kid will say, well, why don't you just build a glass dome under the ocean that you put all the trees under? Yeah, the answers are sometimes crazy. And yeah, sometimes they're wrong. But that's not the point. The point is to inspire children to test a hypothesis and to use their creativity to come up with it. And it makes me a little sad to talk about this, but there's one kid in Lake Weir High School when I gave a talk there where his hand was up in the air every single time I asked a question. And I eventually had to say, like, hey, you in the front row there, calm down a little bit. Geez, this kid was like, he was answering every single question before anybody else. And I said to his teacher afterwards, I said, that kid is amazing. What's the deal with him? She says, it's the first time he talked to class all semester. And she says that his parents are abusive, that they treat him horribly. I mean, this is how the difference you can make just by approaching this. Sorry, it was a really bad day. This kid has an awful life, but finally had somebody who didn't just expect him to memorize stuff, who asked him, what do you think? And it may have been the first time that he ever was asked that. The first time he was ever asked to give his opinion on something and have his opinion valued. That is how you change stuff, and that's how you teach kids. Kids are hypothesis testers. And there's a scientist at Berkeley named Alison Gopnik. She's got great YouTube videos of how you can have kids test a hypothesis, and that's what they want to do. And we wreck that. And I think we can do better with that. 5, how do we create a balance between research and communication, especially with the amount of science critics ready to contest everything you say? And the only way to create that balance is to make it a part of make it your business to do it. And graduate students, early faculty are the worst. Early career faculty will say, well, I don't get credit for it, so why would I do it? I'm worried about tenure and promotion. Why do I have to do it? That's exactly why you have to do it. It's because it is so critical for us as scientists to be stepping into these conversations correctly and respectfully and doing it through the most powerful medium available to us, using podcasts, using video, using blogs, using social media to amplify your messages and the good messages of others. Sharing my stuff, I'll share your stuff, but you got to create that content. So creating content, amplifying the content of others. Those are 2 things that you should do on a daily basis. At least amplify other people's stuff. that's how we build at least the perception that science is excited to communicate. The other part of that is you are on a cusp of change. And I think it is a time when this kind of communications strategy and these types of efforts will be applauded and will be embraced and will be something that universities are holding up as important parts of what they do. And, you know, right now there's still quite a few who say not what we should be doing. So I won't name names. But that's it for me. Is there any other questions? I'm happy to answer questions as long as you like. Oh, Angelica, what's cooking? Is that you? It says raised hand.
Hi, Karen. Yeah, it's me.
Hey.
No, not a question, just a comment. From when you were talking about how inspired kids, and when we were talking, you know, with the kids at school, one of the things that struck me the most is that we often underestimate the kids just because they are kids, and we say, they won't understand anything. It's unbelievable. They understand more than you think. They really do. So usually you try to dumb it down or something for them, and believe me, they can be, you know, paired with you. They really.
Yeah, don't ever dumb it down for a kid. Actually, if you raise the bar, they'll meet it. And it isn't, and it's so important, especially like until third, fourth, fifth grade. Fifth grade is kind of the edge. Don't ever invalidate what they say. Go out of your way to try to show the value in what they presented. You know, the kid who said solve citrus greening by growing the trees under the ocean, I would say that would be a great way because there's no insects down there and it's not able to spread. Well, how would you propose to get the oranges up here? You know, lean into it. And if you do that, I mean, can you imagine the power of if everybody just spent the time getting kids to think critically about a question rather than trying to memorize the facts? And I'm with you 1,000%. And we'll do some more of these things this fall. I'm not traveling as much in the as I used to, which gives me more time to spend here in Alachua County Schools. So I'll take
that's great. That's something I really missed. So if somebody in this group who's watching you, I hope that if they have the opportunity to do it, I will highly recommend it. It changed you too. Like it's very eye-opening.
It's fun because when we go, we'll maybe have 5 or 6 classes to speak to in the same day, and I do the first one, and then you do the rest. And I show you, you know, here's how you work an audience, and it's part stand-up comedy, it's part teaching, it's part thinking on your feet. All you're trying to do is connect the kids' ideas with. By all you're doing is validating their approach. That's all you'd spend your time doing, no matter how crazy it sounds. You're encouraged creative thinking. That's what you want to do. So good stuff. Any other questions or thoughts?
Good to see you, Kevin.
Yeah, nice to see you. This is really fun. Where are you now?
I'm in the Netherlands.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
Yep. So I'm joining from far away.
No, I thought so. That's really nice to see you. That's really cool.
Yeah. Utrecht University.
Yeah, cool. Anybody else got any question, thoughts?
I do. I have one. I was
Hey, sir.
wondering, Dr. Folta, how and when you got involved in this?
Well, it's kind of a funny question. When I was in high school, I tried doing this speech and debate stuff. I thought that'd be cool. You know, I'm a nerd. And we had a horrible teacher who was super cliquey and wouldn't let me on the team. So I did it when I was in college and was in a very good program with a very small program. And I learned a lot about argument and persuasion, you know, extemporaneous speaking, all that stuff, and a lot about how to address arguments, and did very well. I was a national finalist for a long time, for 2 years. And after that, took that same skill set and really started to coach others in those areas. And I've done a lot of work in corporate consulting and communication. I've done other things like that. But it all boils down to those basic fundamental skills of how do you change someone's mind, and really important stuff. We're never taught that as scientists. It's the reason why I ever got a grant. I'm not smart like a Harry Klee or a Don McCarty or any of the other faculty in our department. Either Mark Settles, geez. I get by telling a story and by making a grant proposal that's relatable and interesting to the reader, and persuading them to give me money. It works.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Any other thoughts, questions? I really would like to have more of you producing media. And so even just producing 500-word essays about some topic of interest, I have many places that would be happy to publish your work online. And these are places that get, hundreds of thousands of downloads. And it's a way, and if any of you want to host the podcast with me, it's great. It's a lot of fun. And I make sure you sound brilliant because it's all recorded ahead of time. And, we get, Modesta's here. Modesta's really good at this. We've done this, right, Modesta? It's a good experience.
I'm sorry I was muted. I've had a lot of fun doing that. I think I've produced about 5 episodes now. And the thing is, it kind of helps to bring in some African content, like sharing research that has been done by researchers in other parts of the country aside the US. So it's really good. I've had a lot of fun doing it.
Yeah, I love the ones that you've done. So Modesta has co-hosted with me where she was, where we did this together and we sat in my office and I would say, why don't you ask this question? And then, we edit that out. So, and then she'll say, hey, Kevin, why don't you ask this? So, and so we have that kind of conversation behind the scene and then we clear that out. So it just sounds like, like we're really got it together, so I could do that with anybody. And Modesta actually hosted a number of episodes on her own that are fantastic and got good downloads, by the way. Oh, wow. So, this is a tool that's open to any of you and you are more than welcome to join. Tomorrow is the 5-year anniversary of the podcast and 244 downloads, and I'll be interviewing Rob Fraley. So the guy who made the first transgenic plants, really, really good interview. So if you have the opportunity to listen, it'll be up tomorrow morning. But please, take me up on these opportunities. Too many people say, oh yeah, I'd love to do it, but I don't have the time. Make the time. And I'll help you with editing. I will help you with whatever. It's real easy. And we'll get your stuff placed in good places. And that's the stuff that makes a huge difference in today's job market. Everybody's got a degree. Everybody's got a paper or two, and maybe papers in good places. The thing that's going to separate you from everybody else is you demonstrating your willingness to engage the public and create scientific content beyond expectations. That's it. Any other questions or thoughts?
Maybe. This is so great. Thank you so much for talking to us and having this discussion in the end. Oh, I think there's one more question at the bottom.
Oh, cool.
Thanks. Oh, no, just thank you.
Thank you. Okay, well, that's a good question. Well, thank you. No, you're welcome. And, miss all of you and can't wait to see you again. And we're going to have a big party out here at the place when we get back. We'll get on the other side of this COVID thing. And so hope for vaccines soon. Thank you very much, everybody. We'll see you pretty soon, okay?
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Oh, someone is asking where they can listen to the podcast.
Oh, okay, where you can listen to the podcast. Well, thank you for asking. It's on talkingbiotechpodcast.com. It's also on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, and any place where you consume your electronic media. There are over 244 episodes, and if you go back through them, I'm sure you'll find something that you really like, and you'll recognize quite a few of the names because a lot of interviews with folks at University of Florida, and a lot of focus on COVID in the last few months, which has been good. So check out the podcast list, and and certainly let me know if you would like to be part of that list.
Great. Okay. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you later.
Everyone.